my good friend AJ Brown. Plan however you need to plan. I don't think he plays until week 6 because when I was looking at week 5 being the bye week, I can't imagine they bring him back
for a game.
For one game. Anytime you have that bye week there, if there's an injury and you're kind of trying to estimate when the player's going to get back, I think AJ Brown he's almost definitely missing this week, and that would say he's going to come back for week 4 and then go out week 5 for a bye week, or would you rather have him have another couple weeks of rest to make sure he's really good to go? They're going to rest him is what my best guess is. So I would plan on being out and without AJ Brown until week 6. Welcome into another episode of Live Good, Die Nasty. I'm Arlen. This is Nate. We're your hosts. How you doing, Nate?
Doing great, man. This has been a good week. Excited to get into what we're doing for week 3 as we're jumping into more and more football. A lot to break down. Wanted to see how we're feeling about what we were worried about as we come into the season. So excited to get into it.
Yeah. There's been a lot of things that we were curious. So we had that episode early back. We can we'll link to it, but and go through more of the details of what we're looking at. But we're just kind of revisit some of those. I'll also say that we are quietly on our way to 100 subscribers. So please be a part of it. Jump in, subscribe, leave us some comments below, and we can have that chat and conversation. We've responded to 100% of the messages that come in. We always enjoy it and always enjoy connecting with y'all. So our curiosities, our fears. What is one of the ones that I think, I guess it's going to be like a temperature check on how we're feeling on what we talked about before. Is there one that sticks out to you that you have a good feeling that you know the truth to, or you're starting to get a picture of?
One that I'll talk about here, and this might be just like kicking him while he's down a little bit, but one of the curiosities that I had that was kind of team specific was the Caleb Williams hype.
That's true.
And what are we seeing about this? Like he has, and there have been a couple injuries, but he does have a lot of great pieces around him. And one thing that I brought up is that a lot of folks didn't see because his West Coast quarterback coming from USC when he was drafted. I watched a lot of those games in real time and saw his just emotional maturity and how he handled adversity a little bit. And he has been kind of lauded for being a mature, high IQ player. But in reality, it didn't always show up that way in how he handled things. And it's kind of showing up now. He's facing some adversity. He's not handling pressure well. And then I'm reading into this. So I will fully admit this is a social media take all day. But I was looking at his interaction with CJ Stroud after the game last week, and Stroud kind of leaned into him as
I did notice that
feedback. Yeah, was giving him some feedback. Stroud happened to be mic'd up, so I saw it in the Twitterverse this week around how he was trying to give him some encouragement, let him know like keep your head up. And Caleb Williams just like looking super disengaged, even walked away from him at one point. And Stroud like grabbed him and said, "Hey, come here, man!" Like, and tried to like give him more. People have been saying that it seemed like Stroud was trying to little brother him a little bit, but at the end of the day, like you got to take that feedback, right? And how many times have we watched like frustrated quarterbacks go in, thank their go shake hands and appreciate the competition a little bit, and Caleb Williams wasn't really doing that. So it's just start when your things aren't going well, you start to see a lot of the question marks show up, and of course they're extrapolated and they're blown up. But
sure.
2 weeks in, it's not looking pretty.
Was that a storyline that view? Because I'll say I saw that live, and so I didn't know the story. I didn't know that it kind of blew up afterwards, but that was definitely something that I noticed. The body language was dismissive, and there was like a little bit of an ego or whatever, or maybe it just wasn't the right time for it. But
right.
I did catch the same vibe from that. Is that something that other people are talking a lot about, that interaction?
Yeah, so in the it even came up in the post game interview with Stroud, like, hey, they brought up the body language, and he said, hey,
Oh,
I wasn't trying to little brother him or anything, like I was just trying to, give him some feedback, give him some, give him some encouragement, keep his head up, and he has the right to feel the way he's going to feel. He just lost the game, like that's a tough feeling, and I don't feel like he was trying to diss me at all. He was just feeling his emotions after the game.
yeah.
But that's kind of my point, is that like
Sure.
that showing up a little bit after the game, especially after week 2, like, bro, it's still early. You got time to grow and just take every opportunity. But yeah, it did definitely blow up throughout the week. It's out there. If you just jump into social media, I'm sure you can find posts all about it. But yeah, it's just one of those things. Of course, still way too early to say he was any sort of bust or anything. There's a whole nother player from last year's number one that is more apt to be talked about as a bust quarterback.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, Caleb Williams had a rough start, which isn't helping a Dunze out at all.
No, and it usually takes time, and it's interesting because the question has always been, is it because it's a crappy team that the quarterback goes to that takes so long for rookie quarterbacks to
Yeah,
be viable, or is it takes a while to develop? And then we see Jaden Daniels. Given he has a different skill set of why he's in throwing, he's still more successful right now than Caleb Williams.
right.
Stroud was last year to a crappy team, and then Caleb Williams is going to arguably, we've talked about, the best situation a rookie quarterback has walked into. So yeah, that maybe it's just a lot of pressure. Maybe he's not as good as people thought. Maybe everything's fine this week too. But we'll see it all soon. I think I'd like to see that team be competitive and support those wide receivers that are fantasy relevant on there and make them fantasy relevant again. Does that sound like a slogan?
Yeah, it did.
It did. I said it. I heard it too.
It did.
um, I heard it. So my piece, and I talked a little bit about this on last episode, but in general, I'm really still interested in seeing where it goes for these running backs that are pass catching running backs that can support multiple different running backs. Instead of a committee, it's two different types of running backs. So one was, James Cook I mentioned as that type, but we kind of spoke to how he's not actually doing a lot of pass catching. He's kind of acting more of a traditional one. Achane in some ways has been acting he did a goal line rush week 1, which I thought was different of how they've used him before, just straight up the middle kind of run. And he's what gives and what Sproles would be today if this is how they valued this position and this type of running back. And that's this pass catching 7 of 7 for targets, receptions week 1 and week 2, 14 for 14 total this year. And I think the stat that I'll try to get back to it. The stat that I had read out when we talked last was that he's behind only Godwin in yards per route run, and he's leading all other wide receivers in this area. He's one of the top wide receivers as a running back in the
Right.
league right now, and it's just awesome to see. He had 76 yards the first in just receiving yards the first week, 69 in the second. He's breaking fantasy and not in a bell cow traditional way. I'm excited to see this continue. I think Gibbs is going to have similar weeks as Achane has. He just had him first.
Yeah, and one we're not talking about, and maybe because he's a little bit more under the radar, but Breece Hall is kind of doing it as well. Like when you take a look at, he's had 14 targets in the first 2 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
12 receptions, almost 100 yards receiving. That he's got that touchdown. 30
And you've got
attempts
another
for
running
18.
back that can be viable there in Allen.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true too. Yeah, and the fact that they're using both of these guys, they're splitting
Mm-hmm.
a little bit more than we kind of anticipated. So he's got the support that Achane doesn't currently have with even though I feel like he should. We all thought Jalen Wright was going to be a thing, at least I did.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Especially when
got
Mostart went down, you would think that that's when
right.
we would see Wright come in. But yeah,
But instead, we're seeing a little more of Jeff Wilson than we expected.
True, and even when Jeff Wilson went down in that game, Achane just got everything, and
Yeah.
Wright really didn't pick up. They didn't pick up the usage for Wright in that moment too. But yeah, we've got Montgomery and Gibbs that can both be great plays, and like starting running back great plays. Breece Hall and Allen. You'll always have one that's more like fluctuates more than the other in these, and then you have Achane and whoever's going to really own that second place in Miami. Mostert's coming back from injury. Let's see if it's still him. But we have three teams where it's okay to have a committee, and it's not a bell cow, but some of them are, at least one of them are producing like a bell cow, and the other
Yeah.
still producing like a RB2. And that's something that we haven't had. It's usually bell cow and nothing, or RB2 RB2. We're having this like stud performance, and we still have a great performance from the other guy. I'm excited to see this change. I think it's saving that position in fantasy, and giving us a little bit more options to play with. I think it's going to be fun over the next couple of years of seeing more and more teams look at a running back differently like that.
Yeah. One that is starting to show, and it's still early, and I don't think it's going to play out the rest of the year like this, but this kind of ties into another one of your curiosities, so I'll bring him up. But how they're utilizing Derrick Henry in Baltimore. Justice Hill is getting some run and some receptions, right? So he had 9 opportunities in week 1 between targets and attempts. Only 6 in week 2, but he's still scoring. He's double-digit points fantasy-wise in week 1. Justice Hill dad. So, and it's kind of a light version, obviously, and kind of the opposite of what we're talking about with Achane and Breece Hall, whereas Derek Hall is kind of the bell cow. Derrick Henry is the bell cow, but you also have that passing down receiving back in there that's still scoring for you as well.
That's true, and this is closer to what we were kind of imagining with Henry of not in there even. He hasn't even been there 50% of the snaps so far. Is very similar to like how Montgomery is like, and yeah, you have that pass. If you can have that pass catching one where the difference we're seeing right now back, and I keep bringing up Sproles, just that the classic example. Sproles was always the extra guy, and the pass catching running back has always been the extra guy that could be viable on some weeks if he gets enough. And the safe floor, the power guy was like the one that you wanted to have. But Montgomery is the power guy who doesn't catch as many passes. Henry is the power guy that doesn't catch as many. At Mostert, power guy that doesn't catch as many. Breece Hall is not the power guy, but I mean he's not the secondary running back in that situation. But for the most part, what we're looking at is these. I think the floors are safer on the number 2s now because it's the pass catching ones that are actually kicking butt right now, and it's
so close.
So close. I almost got yelled at. No, but it's so I think that's kind of a switch too of just like the secondary one that's not scoring as much. You can feel confident in putting him as your flex because it's a safer secondary option than a secondary one who's like sometimes catching passes because that can fluctuate so much more.
Let's talk about this other league-wide curiosity, and it's just week 2, and I feel like teams are holding back, but we also chatted about the new Kickoff and what we kind of expected out of the new Kickoff and how it's going to go. I don't have the numbers in front of me, and this is kind of anecdotal, but it doesn't seem that much more exciting to me.
I should have looked up the numbers for this. It doesn't, but I heard right before the season that a lot of teams were planning, and this is what I have noticed. A lot of teams are planning on taking the L on this one and waiting for other teams to just be the guinea pigs and figure it out and then model it. Where they were just like, most of the time we're still going to kick it out, and then slowly throughout the season, some of the teams with better special teams minds, I don't know, people who are maybe just ballsier are gonna try something new, figure it out, and then teams will start following. So I think this is going to be a slower build. I was just so disappointed in week 1, first kickoff to start the game. It's always ceremonial, and then it's always like kickoff and commercial break, and I was like, it's finally going to be a play now to start the whole season, and it was
Yeah.
Kickoff commercial. It's such a bummer, but I think it's just going to be a slow burn, and I'm not confident that it's going to be fully figured out this year. I think it's going to be something that changes over a long time now.
Yeah, that makes sense. And even if teams have drawn stuff up, I wouldn't be surprised for the more confident special team savvy folks to be holding on to it for later in the season anyway, even if they think they have it figured out, and would be waiting for relevant or more playoff or relevant games to happen before they start pulling that stuff out. Because it is a copycat league for sure. And maybe they still want to be the only ones doing it when it matters later.
I did see a great play, I think it was college or high school, for a punt that was brilliant. The guy walked up the whole mannerism as if he was kicking. He swung his leg and then he threw a sky pass. And and the other team just, like the kicking team, just jumped up and grabbed it instead of because the guy was fair catching it, and he jumped up and grabbed it, and they kept possession and got a first down. And that could get me into.
I saw that highlight. It might have been. I feel like it might have been high school.
Yeah, it would only work in high school. Everyone else would see that. But if we can do that, I would be down with punting. When we don't use a kicker. All right.
Get over this, man.
Unnecessary.
I'll go. I know that you don't want to talk about kickers, and this is off script a little bit, but I heard somewhere, and I'm just going to look this up really quick because it's insane to think about. But for the season, in fantasy points, when you take a look at right now in traditional fantasy scoring, Brandon Aubrey has 38 points on the year.
I won an old man league that still has kickers. Yeah.
And Kai Fairbairn, 37 points. Those two outscoring Devontae Smith, Deebo Samuel, Devontae Adams, Rashee Rice, Jamar Gibbs, Joe Mixon, DK Metcalf, Tony Pollard, David Montgomery, CJ Stroud, CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, Brian Robinson, Bijan Robinson, Patrick Mahomes, all scored less than the two kickers that I just named.
It's so insulting to fantasy football itself. It's so gross. Out of too many leagues, 7 leagues I'm in this year. It's the most I've actually committed myself to. The only one that has kickers is the only one that's not on Sleeper. It's still on ESPN. It's all old. I fax in my draft picks. I fax in my draft picks, and I have to pick a kicker. I in that league I drafted in the 15th round pick. I'm like, fine, now I'll pick not a kicker. And I had to. It was like, nope, you can only pick a kicker, because I had to fill each position. And I wanted to just protest and not get a kicker. And I wasn't even allowed to. All right, well, that's just silly. I can't believe you subjected me to that stat. That stat read.
It was a fun conversation.
Yeah, well, let's talk about my fear. So far, it's not a big deal. Kyren Williams, my biggest fear was and I said that it's going to be a rule for me and I'm excited to lock in this rule. If Tank's a different story this year. It's kind of weird over there right now, but Tank comes in. Is ETN the guy? Or is Tank going to cut it in last year? And it's no, long behold, the great running back is a great running back, and he keeps the job. Walker and Charbonnet, long behold, Walker's the guy, he keeps the job. Now Corum comes in, and Kyren Williams is here. Is he going to take it, or are they ruining it? And there's a little more fear with the history of McVay. But week 1, 91% snap for Kyren Williams, 79 in week 2. Both extremely high. Now, the production hasn't been fully there. It's not bad. In our league, it's 14 15 fantasy points. He's involved in both the run and receiving, 3 of 3 for week 1 and 4 of 5 for week 2. So he's catching it. He's there. The offense itself is having trouble. The left tackle is going to come back from injury, so that should help out a little bit. And there's not anyone else on that offense now, so that should help too. But the main story is 91% snap percentage and 79, and Corum's not the guy. Corum had 8 carries, and all of them were after everything was over last week. It was all garbage time, and that's when he finally came in to lower it all the way down to 79% of snaps.
Yeah, he had Corum 0 participation, no snaps, no attempts, anything in week 1, 15% of the snaps in week 2. Probably safe to say that Kyren's going to be the guy.
Yeah,
even returning punts and what have you. So
I've sent some offers in redraft because I have them already in Dynasty. In redraft, I've been kind of going off trying to grab them because there's not many people that snap percentage has that high of a snap percentage that's involved in the offense that you would be able to buy that hasn't had the same level of production, and it's just a matter of time with him. So I think that's somebody that you can try to pry from people.
I think there's a shot there for sure. But I think you have nothing to worry about on that fear so far. We'll find out.
So far.
Yeah, so far. The other one that I had on here, and I think the jury is still out on, so I don't want to jump into this too much because it might be too early to talk about. It might be a future episode. But it's what is happening with Zach Robinson's influence in Atlanta. Are we finally going to see the resurrection of great fantasy performances?
Oh, yeah.
From Drake, from Pitts, from Bijan wasn't bad last year, but just still seeing the explosion. And I think we're seeing, Bijan is still good at football. 16 points per week. He's being used across the board. I don't think Bijan was the concern here.
No, it's Pitts in London.
It's Pitts in London. And London had a pretty decent game this past week. He's in all the snaps, 100% of the snaps in week 1, 97% in week 2.
His yards per target and catch are so low, and for both weeks, and I think he doesn't get that touchdown. He doesn't come down with that, and we're talking a whole new story, which obviously he did, so that's fair. But I'm more nervous.
To get open.
Yeah, I'm a little nervous on that one.
The one thing I will say is that he being Cousins did not look great in week 1. I was super worried about what was going to be coming of him as a quarterback into this, coming off of that surgery, what it was going to look like. They were giving the farm away as far as I think they were doing everything from shotgun or pistol. They were under center a lot more this past week. And I think he's getting more confident into this offense and hopefully a little less worried about his injury and re-injuring it. And he's showing that he's a little bit more mobile. So hopefully that's growing into this offense and we'll see more. But yeah, I think the jury's still out. I think it's too early to tell. But that was just another one of my curiosities.
Yeah, I think the Drake London, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave are all in this same boat for me where I need to know. This is the year that I'm giving all of them to define them as, are you a top tier or not? And I am interested to see. I think Pitts, I'm really afraid that he just isn't that, and I don't understand it. It doesn't really make sense to me. I keep bumping up against wanting to just say he is it, and why, and it's the offense fault for not utilizing him, and maybe in the end it's just not. London's one of those ones where I'm betting he's not a top tier, is what my gut is telling me. We'll see as Kirk Cousin heals or gets replaced if he doesn't step it up. But Garrett Wilson, I think, is my next one where it's my tier is Drake London, most fear of him not being top. Garrett Wilson is next, second most fear, and I'm a little bit more okay with Olave, even though it's a weird situation there. But all of them are kind of in a prove it year. One of the things that I don't think I mentioned on our curiosities, but it's definitely something we've talked about in our ranking of wide receivers with Olave is, and what I was curious about kind of falls into this new offensive coordinator conversation is the reason why I thought Olave in Dynasty is still a top 10 wide receiver is, and what gave me hope for him was in last year, they had the fewest pre-snap motions out of any team in the NFL, which is it's directly correlated with success of wide receivers. And like this, just and it's a direct like sign that like kickers in an ESPN platform shows how old you are and how archaic your fantasy football league is. That's the same for pre-snap motion. If you do not move a lot, it shows how old your offense is and that it's not going to be successful. And I was curious and I was hopeful because the offensive coordinator, who was the passing coordinator, his name's escaping me, but from San Francisco, who ran the most pre-snap motions last year, moves over. And in week 1, the Saints have the most pre-snap motions, and their offense looks electric. Derek Carr, we spoke about last episode of how he's actually the number 1 or 2 quarterback on the year, behind Baker Mayfield, of course. But the pre-snap motion is up, and Olave is doing well. Now, what I cannot wrap my head, I think Olave is still the one, but there's that thing in the back of my head that goes, is Shaheed 1B, not 2? But I mean, so I wanted to see at least 6 targets. That's what I was hoping for this week. And I saw 6 targets, and he fell right at the 1 and like backed in. Like they kind of had to look if it really was a touchdown or not. And then Kamara gets his 4th touchdown. So had he gone in, we're saying, yes, of course, Olave is the one. But Shaheed 2 weeks in a row is killing it. So, I mean, what's the truth there? What's your gut feeling on that offense, on Olave, on Shaheed? Tell me what to feel.
I think, well, I think Olave's still going to be the one, maybe the 1A, but like the one, because he's going to get more, even though it was just six targets last week, I think is what you said.
Mm-hmm.
He's still going to get more generally than I think Shaheed will. And I think Shaheed's going to take the top off of defenses, which is what pre-snap motion, all that stuff opens up for you.
Yeah.
And so that of course is where Shaheed eats, and that's what it shows up in his yards per catch and his target. And so his receptions and catches are mattering more. He's got the 2 touchdowns, which is 2 more than your boy Olave. Sure. But I think that comes back down to earth a little bit, right? As the season goes on. I feel like you're buying Derek Carr a little bit more than you were after week 1. But I think he's still coming he'll come back down to earth, and with that, Olave will rewrite.
Yeah, I hope so. I think they're both real and sustainable. I think Shaheed hit the level of a every week flex option now, along with Olave. But I think Olave is still he's still the guy with more talent, and Shaheed still has a little bit more of a connection with Carr than Olave does, and I don't know how it's not a bigger priority to rebalance that a little bit. We'll see throughout the season how it goes, but I've started looking at Olave as or Shaheed as the 1B instead of the 2, and I think it's fair. I mean, 4 targets, 5 targets, I think it was, or in reverse that 5 targets, 4 targets for week 1, week 2. So that's right in the area of like, if that's the floor, let's say, then he's a real wide receiver.
Yeah, and he's getting like 4 or 4. When it's 96 yards on those 4 receptions, you don't really care that it's that few of receptions, right? Like, because they're going for touchdowns. And he's getting the ball when he's wide open, right? He's getting out there. So yeah, I think he's gonna always be around that reception floor. I don't think that he's gonna have 20-point weeks every week, but fair enough on the call out.
Yeah. looking at probably our last piece we'll talk about, unless there's anything else you want to throw in, but the Chargers, that was your fear, and we have to talk about your feelings. How are you feeling about your fear was if Chargers are going to become irrelevant fantasy wise, will they at least be a good football team? How is it feeling on the fantasy football front, Nate, and how is it feeling as a Chargers fan?
Well, here's the deal: is that I think we anticipated the running back hot hand carousel to be a little bit more split than it has been.
Sure.
As far as points go, right? So J.K. Dobbins is showing just the guy that can find
opportunities are pretty even, as you mentioned last episode.
Yeah. So he's finding his way to the holes a little bit faster, but they're still going to continue to give Gus the opportunities down the stretch. So that he's still going to get those chances in short yardage situations, have the chance to get those touchdowns. But right now, fantasy wise, at least we've got at least one person that's getting you some fantasy points, and I think J.K. Dobbins may, if he stays healthy, prove to be the value of the draft this year. I would have said it would have been between him and Cooper Kupp, but with the Cooper Kupp injury, I think J.K. Dobbins shows up as probably your value of the draft right now. And they're looking good at football, so far. And I mean, to be fair, they played the Raiders and they played Carolina.
It's not fun football, but it's good football.
They're good at football. They're good. It's an exciting defense, actually, when you watch it happen.
Yeah.
Which isn't sexy football, but it's fun football to watch as a fan.
When do you think they're going to hit 150 yards passing? What week?
When will they? Let me pull up their schedule really quick.
Denver.
I wouldn't be surprised if it's not a while.
Denver or Arizona.
Let me see how far back. Of course, when I need to find something.
So right now, I was actually I said that as a tease, but I didn't. I said that because I was actually shocked by the yardage when looking up Justin Herbert's, like, his passing yardage, 144 and 130, too much like what we thought. But I think that's worse than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, he's not. Yeah, so they're all about controlling the game, right? And so he's been in a situation where if JK is going off for 100 plus yards, scoring touchdowns, they can get the running game going. This was Harbaugh established early on. If they can keep control of the game with the defense and by running the ball, they don't need Herbert to be the hero. I think, though, he surpasses 150 once they start playing good teams. So I would say KC week 4 is where we see a little bit more out of Herbert, than needing to depend on his arm a little bit more. You
can't be one-dimensional against the Chiefs and survive. Yeah, I think that's when you would have to probably push that.
Yeah, I think that's where we see it. I don't want to wait for an exciting Justin Herbert to happen until Denver or week 7 or like down the line, right? So we're hoping that they're just establishing who they are early on, and then we get to see a fun, exciting Herbert. But hey, if they keep dominating games, I'm not going to complain as a fan. But yeah, it hasn't been fun to watch from an offensive point of view first couple weeks, but I'm a little biased, so I still have fun doing it.
So speaking of a live trade, I'm putting this together right now, and I don't know if this is something that you'd even consider.
Oh, I thought you were going to hit accept on something that was going to piss me off.
No, I'm going to send you something that'll probably piss you off. All right, so there's a couple scrap players that would be in this to balance my quarterback situation out. But what if you gave me CTA's first and Bijan Robinson for Kyren Williams and Josh Allen?
Yeah, no, that's not something I'm considering today. Because that takes away 2 things from me, right? Like,
you know, originally I was going to say Herbert and the first CTA's first for Josh Allen and Kyren Williams, but I don't think I like Herbert enough to actually do that myself.
Right. So, for context, CTA owns the
Probably
first
the
round pick
101
here for next year, and it's probably at
within
least
the
a top
top
three
three.
pick for
Yeah,
next year. Yeah, it's a top three pick next year. Potentially. No offense, CTA.
I mean offense.
But fair enough. But yeah, no, there's no way I'm doing that. Because you're over here talking about is Josh Allen hitting the end of his God mode. Um, and so I'd be getting a quarterback on the decline for two pieces that would be a major part of a
That was
rebuild.
not
If
that
I
was
need to move
last
to rebuild,
episode, not this episode. This episode, I think it's been a while, and I've thought it through. And Josh Allen he's got 10+ years left of dominance, and if you want a piece of that, I'll take a first and somebody to start be a
oh,
backup for me.
I see where you're coming from. Switch that name to Jaden Daniels, and I'd still probably not consider it, but I would consider it more.
Can't do that.
Yeah,
He's so
that's what I
good.
thought. He's so good at football. At fantasy football, anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, this has been fun, man. Going back, revisiting some of this stuff.
Yeah. I
A
do.
lot more to talk about as weeks continue.
I want to throw out one more thing, just because I think in general it would be a nice, quick, short. Uh, but I think it's an important piece that when I was looking up my good friend AJ Brown. One, I think I've said it before that AJ Brown is probably someone I would has years left of success and dominance, but it's about that time where you start thinking about in Dynasty if you want to move, or if you're competing, if you really want to just go down with the ship on it. But his bye week is week 5, and it's kind of like teetering this week of like, is he going to play or not? Probably not. It's doubtful now. Finally, I would say, and what I would bet on, and this is especially important in redraft, because in Dynasty you're not going to move him because he's out for. But in redraft, I would plan however you need to plan. I don't think he plays until week 6, because when I was looking at week 5 being the bye week, I can't imagine they bring him back
for a game.
For one game. Anytime you have that bye week there, if there's an injury and you're kind of trying to estimate when the player's going to get back, I think AJ Brown, he's almost definitely missing this week, and that would say he's going to come back for week 4 and then go out week 5 for a bye week. Or would you rather have him have another couple weeks of rest to make sure he's really good to go? They're going to rest him is what my best guess is. So I would plan on being out and without AJ Brown until week 6. So make those changes you need, because if you're not and you're like thinking he's going to come back and you put yourself in a tough position, it's hard to climb out of that when you have your round 1, round 2 wide receiver out for that long.
Agreed.
Cool.
Yeah, and then when it comes out of the bye, he's playing Cleveland, right out the gate, which is going to be tougher on him than that after coming off of injury. But so week 7 out of you're looking at the Giants, whereas the next time you're probably sure that he's going to have production.
I mean, we're still playing him in week 6, right?
Yeah, we are still playing if he's playing.
Yeah.
Temper expectations.
Yeah, but Smith is legitimate from week 1. While he was playing, he was still a legit pairing with AJ Brown from all of the second half of last season. Smith, and then first week here when they were sharing time, he was still there, and now he's getting his time and being successful without AJ Brown. I think it's going to be 1A 1B. I think AJ Brown is still probably the lead, but plan on being without him, and know that they don't have to ride him as hard as they did in years prior. All right.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
All right, man.
All right. Well, it's been a great episode. Again, if you've stuck around this long, that means you liked it pretty decently. So throw us a subscribe, throw us a like. Most importantly, start that conversation in the chat, and we love in the comments below. We love having that conversation with you. We are on our very, very modest goal, but we're chugging along to our first goal, which is 100. You nailed it. That's great.
That was a hot mess.
100 subscribers. We'd love for y'all to be a part of it. But either way, we'll be back. We're trying to do every week this year, and having that conversation that we would be having anyways, and we're just hitting record before.
Love it.
Cool.
All right, man.
All right. Be easy, y'all. I like that dance move.